What if I told you that in all of human history, there were only two men who made the Prince of Darkness himself tremble with fear? Not kings with mighty armies, not prophets with miraculous powers, but two individuals whose very existence posed such a threat to evil that Lucifer, couldn't even approach them. Their stories are hidden in plain sight within the pages of Scripture. Yet most people walk right past them without understanding the profound spiritual warfare that surrounded their lives. Today we're going to uncover these two extraordinary men and discover what made them so spiritually untouchable that even the enemy of our souls had to retreat. But here's what's truly remarkable. Their power wasn't in what they did, but in who they were. And that same power, it's available to you today. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a man so connected to heaven that earth could no longer contain him. This wasn't just someone who prayed occasionally or went to church on Sundays. This was Enoch, a man who literally walked with God. The Bible gives us this incredible statement about Enoch. He walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. Just like that. No death, no grave, no funeral. He simply stepped out of this world and into eternity. But why did this terrify Lucifer? Think about it. When you walk with someone every day, you start to become like them. You pick up their mannerisms, their way of thinking, their priorities. Enoch didn't just believe in God. He lived in constant communion with the Creator of the universe. Every breath he took was synchronized with heaven's rhythm. Here's what made Enoch so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. His very presence was like a piece of heaven invading earth. Everywhere he went, the atmosphere changed. Demons fled. Darkness retreated. It wasn't because Enoch was trying to cast out devils. It was because the glory of God had so saturated his life that evil couldn't coexist in his presence. The ancient book of Enoch tells us that God showed him visions of the future, the mysteries of creation, and the coming judgment. This man was so trusted by God that he was given secrets that even angels longed to understand. Can you imagine being in a conversation with someone who had just returned from walking with the Almighty? But here's the key. Enoch's power wasn't in his knowledge, it was in his relationship. He didn't just know about God, he knew God personally, intimately, daily. And that relationship was so real, so authentic, that it literally transformed his physical existence. Lucifer feared Enoch because he represented something the devil had lost: forever unbroken fellowship with the Creator. Every time the enemy looked at Enoch, he was reminded of what he had thrown away in his rebellion. Enoch was living proof that a human being could walk in perfect harmony with God, and that reality tormented the fallen angel who once stood in God's presence. Now, if Enoch was mysterious, Melchizedek is absolutely enigmatic. The Bible introduces him in the most unusual way. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Wait, what? A man with no parents, no birth certificate, no death certificate? Who is this person? Melchizedek appears in Scripture as both a king and a priest, the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God. This combination was revolutionary. In ancient times, kings ruled nations and priests served in temples, but never was someone both, except for Melchizedek. When Abraham, the father of faith himself, returned from battle, he tithed to Melchizedek. Think about this. Abraham, who had just defeated multiple kings and their armies, bowed before this mysterious figure and gave him 10% of everything. Abraham recognized an authority so supreme that he submitted to it without question. But here's what made Lucifer tremble when it came to Melchizedek. This man operated under a different order entirely. He wasn't bound by human limitations or earthly systems. He answered to heaven alone. His authority came directly from the throne of God, and no earthly power could touch him. Some scholars believe Melchizedek was a theophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ himself. Others see him as a special human being elevated to represent God's perfect order. Either way, one thing is clear. He was completely outside the enemy's reach. The writer of Hebrews tells us that Jesus is a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek. This means that Melchizedek's priesthood was so perfect, so eternal, that it became the model for Christ's own ministry. That's not just honor, that's divine appointment. Lucifer feared Melchizedek because he represented perfect justice and perfect mercy combined. As a king, he had the authority to judge. As a priest, he had the compassion to intercede. This dual role made him a complete threat to everything the enemy was trying to accomplish on earth. So what was it about these two men that made them so spiritually invincible? What can we learn from their lives that applies to us today? First, both men lived in a different realm. Enoch walked with God daily. Melchizedek operated under heaven's direct authority. They weren't just living on earth. They were living from heaven while on earth. Their citizenship was above, and that gave them access to resources and protection that earthly beings couldn't understand. Second, both men had no fear of the enemy. Fear is one of the devil's greatest weapons. He uses it to paralyze, to control, to defeat. But when you're walking with God or operating under his direct authority, fear becomes irrelevant. What can darkness do to someone who dwells in the light? Third, both men represented something eternal. Enoch was taken up, never to die. Melchizedek's priesthood continues forever. They weren't bound by the temporary limitations of this world. They were connected to something that would outlast every kingdom, every power, every scheme of the enemy. Here's something most people miss. Spiritual warfare isn't primarily about casting out demons or breaking curses. The highest form of spiritual warfare is simply living in such close relationship with God that darkness has no place to attach itself to your life. Enoch and Melchizedek didn't fight the enemy. They made him irrelevant. Their lives were so filled with God's presence that evil had nowhere to land. That's the kind of spiritual authority that truly terrifies the kingdom of darkness. When Lucifer looked at these men, he didn't see opponents he could defeat through temptation, accusation, or attack. He saw individuals who were so aligned with heaven that touching them would mean coming directly against God himself. And even in his arrogance, the devil knew better than to challenge the Almighty directly. Here's the incredible truth. The same God who walked with Enoch is available to walk with you. The same heaven that backed Melchizedek's authority is ready to back yours. The same protection that made these men untouchable is offered to every believer today. Jesus said, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Paul wrote that we are seated with Christ in heavenly places. Peter declared that we are a royal priesthood. The same spiritual realities that made Enoch and Melchizedek so powerful are available to us through Christ. The question isn't whether God is willing to give you this kind of spiritual authority. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price these men paid. Are you willing to walk with God daily like Enoch? Are you willing to operate under heaven's authority like Melchizedek? As we close, I want to leave you with this challenge. What would your life look like if you truly understood the spiritual authority available to you? What would change if you started each day knowing that the same God who made Lucifer fear two men in the Old Testament is living inside you right now? These weren't fairy tales or myths. These were real men who discovered real spiritual principles that produced real results. And those same principles are waiting for you to apply them in your life today. The enemy of your soul is hoping you'll dismiss this as ancient history. He's counting on you to believe that this kind of spiritual power isn't available anymore. But the truth is, he's just as afraid of what you could become as he was of Enoch and Melchizedek. The question is, are you ready to find out why?